Welcome back to the channel, everyone. At the risk of veering into repetition, the book I'm going to share with you today came to me by coincidence. I happened to walk by a bookstore while traveling to my old college stomping grounds for a concert, and you know I cannot pass up an opportunity to peruse a building full of books if I have the opportunity. This one had the brightest cover and drew me in immediately, so good job, marketing department. The novel I ended up picking up is called Lurkers by Sandy Tan. Before I begin, I do have to give a few trigger warnings for the book. Child predators, yes, that's plural, SA, self-harm, and chop suey. Listen, I don't want YouTube to strike me down, so I just need you to read between the lines on that one. So I actually finished this book at the beginning of February, but for some reason I really struggled with my thoughts for this review. It was the most difficult for me to compile because there is just so much that happens on every single page. It was actually bonkers. And if the content weren't so heavy, I would have finished it in one sitting, I'm sure. It was also because of this book that I actually started keeping notes for books I read after it to make sure I collected everything I wanted to say along the way. So, Lurkers gives us different character perspectives of people who live on Santa Claus Lane. And I Googled it, and Santa Claus Lane is actually a real street in Los Angeles. The novel takes place for the most part in the early 2000s, and our characters are essentially separated into four groups. One group being the Park family of Korean immigrants, and they are thrown an actual million curveballs during the entirety of the novel. Our second group is a man called Raymond, and he is a gay horror novelist who lives across the street from the Parks, and he's not really as popular of an author as he once was. Our third group is the Ireland family, consisting of Mary Sue, who's like a semi-spiritual hippie of sorts, and her adopted Vietnamese daughter named Kate, and the both of them really feel like they just don't belong anywhere. Our fourth group consists of minor-ish characters named Eric, Mr. Z, and Bluto, and I'm trying so hard not to spoil anything about them because while they are in the book for a minimal amount of time, I would say, compared to the other characters, they have such a huge impact on what happens in the book, and that's all I'm going to say. What Tan does throughout the book is she focuses on essentially each character's coming of age story, whether they are 14 years old or 65 in the case for Raymond. And I thought this much hopping around would be confusing, but it actually wasn't because I really felt like Tan spent the right amount of time on each of these characters, and as soon as we learned something juicy about one character, she changed perspectives entirely to another character, which really kept me engaged and interested. I was really invested in what happens to each of these characters. I needed to know how these plot points and characters come together. She also swiftly hops between mundane details and extreme details, and not always in a good way. For the characters, I mean, not the way that she writes. For example, like, there's one scene at the beginning of the book that talks about one of our primary characters just asking a neighbor to turn their music down. A mundane detail unto itself. But by the end of that scene, we see somebody dying by chop suey. Obviously, an extreme detail. In another scene, we have a main character meeting up with an old high school friend. Mundane, detail, to that friend actually detailing them bragging about child SA. Clearly extreme. But not for all characters, but most, I would say, they have some ridiculously unlikable traits that actually made me like them even more. In this novel, nobody is perfect. Not even close. They're all written like actual human beings. Tan does not sugarcoat anything as far as these people are concerned. And I'm not really sure how to explain that without spoiling some stuff, but I'll tell you that I found myself saying, "Stop! What are you doing?" The cringe face came out a lot for this one. And I didn't really relate to anybody in the book, but in this case, it made me like them and the book itself even more. Like, I don't relate to a 17-year-old Korean American girl. I don't relate to a gay male author. I don't relate to an adopted Vietnamese girl. I don't relate to child predators. But those things were interesting to digest in a novel like this because you see all these characters interact with each other in ways that you do not expect. Okay, I am not saying that I liked the characters who are child predators, but please do not report me to Dateline. But seeing how things turn out for them and the other characters they interact with was wild. And recently, this is so funny. Recently, I had somebody comment on one of my previous videos who wanted a recommendation, a book recommendation, about a book that didn't have any drama or something like that, no conflict. And I told him that he was barking up the wrong tree because honestly, I only read books that have something to say about the human condition. I can't even think of a book I've ever read, literally ever, that didn't have some kind of conflict. I was going to suggest a Little Critter book to him, but even those have some drama in them. And I feel like literature is meant to show us ourselves in some kind of way, even if it's not pretty, and Lurkers is a prime example of that. Either way, that person ended up deleting their comment, including my response, so I guess it did not sit right with him. So my recommendation for Lurkers is devour it. It made me so uncomfortable, but in ways that I honestly appreciated. There are some scenes that I wouldn't want my grandmother reading, but overall, this would have been another book I'd have loved to have taught in AP Lit. So, thanks for coming. I hope to see you in the next one. Now, go read something.